Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Hannibal Season 3, Episode 9, and the Woman Clothed with the Sun. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in the episode. So, in this episode, we start with Will leaving his conversation with Hannibal and talking to Alana, who talks to him about what she's doing there, the fact that she's still with Margot, that she carried a baby with Mason's sperm, which gave her a son who is the Verger heir, and that they live happily, and that she is with Hannibal right now because there are 5 keys between him and the outside world, and she wants to hold all of them. And then Will describes his conversation with Hannibal like Hannibal being a fly in the back of his brain, and he had to stop and check if Hannibal was still with him when he left because Hannibal just gets so deeply inside of his head. We then kind of flash back to, I guess, Will's memory of Hannibal helping him with the profile of Dollarhide in his illusion. Like, Will imagines the conversation took place first in the office, then at the crime scene, then out in the yard, etc. Then, as Will leaves the institution where Hannibal is kept, Freddy takes some pictures of him, and Alana then goes in and confronts Hannibal about the plans he has for Will, and she knows he has them, and he accuses her of putting, Will on a pedestal, that none of this was his fault, even though he did make his own choices. Alana then threatens to withhold the courtesies she has provided so far and make his greatest fear of indignity come true before she then leaves. And Hannibal then has a flashback to some of his therapy sessions with Abigail before he killed her. Then we get a little bit of Francis's uh well, they're still trying to make it at this point ambiguous, and so he just kind of looks like he's weirdly moving around as he watches a film on the projector. And then we get Will back at the crime scene, and he's watching some videos of the family before they passed on. Part of Hannibal's advice that he had given was that the families weren't chosen for, like, what made Dollarhide choose the families was the way they lived. So Will went back to the house to see how they lived and watches some videos on a tablet. Then he goes outside. He looks at the yard, which Hannibal also suggested that Dollarhide would enjoy the moonlight after the kill and potentially nude, and so he would need privacy. So Will then goes out to the backyard to look around. He then goes over the fence a little bit and finds the area where there was a stump placed that Francis could sit on to watch the family. There was a branch that was cut so that he would have a clear view into the family, and then a weird symbol carved onto a tree, showing that that's where he had sat and watched the family as they lived. And then, as he is doing this, we get Francis imagining he has a tail. We then move into the lab, where it is revealed that the pets of the family were harmed first, and the reason they believe that that is the case is because they are an early warning system, and this way, if the pets were, say, gone at the vet or unfortunately deceased, they could not then warn the family of an intruder in the home. Will also ends up running into Freddy, who basically threatens to write an article that's unfavorable, trying to get Will to speak with her, saying that they were co-conspirators. Will still hates her, reasonably so. refuses to give the answers. We then show that Francis is there reading an article about Will and Hannibal that Freddie does end up printing before he then goes to somewhere at his work, where he meets Reba, and he and Reba talk about film and him talking about how he wants to film nocturnal animals at the zoo, and so is looking for a very specific type of film. And then he offers her a ride home, and once they get home, they talk, and she is thankful to him for not showing her pity because, as someone who is blind, she does not see herself as in need of pity, but many people give her it, and she likes that he didn't give her that, and they kind of have a moment. We then have Will in his hotel room, and he and Molly talk about, kind of what he's going through, and she informs him that she's invited or adopted a new dog. And then Will says that, hey, I've also adopted a new dog. And he adopts the murdered family's dog, who Dollarhide had injured but not killed before he attacked them. And as there was no one left to claim her, he had claimed her. He then goes to sleep and has one of his sweat-soaking nightmares before waking up and looking in the mirror and seeing his face crack and fall away like a broken mirror. And then we round out this episode with Jack visiting Hannibal, where they once again talk about Will and how Jack purposefully let Hannibal's letter warning Will get to him first, so that when he came, Will would be weakened to it, and Molly and Walter could be used. So basically that Jack is kind of plotting, as well as Hannibal is plotting about Will. And then there is a flashback to Hannibal receiving the call from Will at the end of season 1, where Will says they know, and then talking to Abigail, who is in the kitchen, and telling her to go upstairs before finally a worker of the prison comes in with a phone for Hannibal and says that it is his lawyer on the phone, and then when Hannibal picks it up, it ends up being Francis, who says that he knew Hannibal would be the only one who could possibly understand that he is becoming, and Hannibal asks him what he is becoming, and then Dollarhide says that he is becoming the Great Red Dragon. And that is where this episode completes. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, we'll now rank the episode, and as always, we'll be ranking on our mostly objective ranking list, followed by the personal ranking list. So on this episode, I didn't actually think that there were any negatives that applied, and so we'll start with the positives. We first have our multi-episode supporting character introduction, which is Reba McLean, who works at the same company as Dollarhide and who is blind, and they have become acquainted and seem to like each other at this point. Then we have our multi-season supporting character development, where we find out that Alana and Margot have had a child using Mason's sperm, who is the Verger heir, but that despite being incredibly wealthy now, having married Margot and given birth to the Verger heir, Alana is staying in the position she's in with Hannibal in order to make sure that he cannot escape, worried that somebody else would be manipulated by him. And then we have our multi-episode supporting character development, which is Francis calling Hannibal and revealing that his belief system, what he thinks is that he is becoming a great red dragon, and now some of his contortions and imagining he has a tail and his back tattoo, etc., start to make sense. But that is 2 points plus 2 points plus 3 points, which equals 7 points total for this episode. And that brings our mostly objective ranking so far to in first Dulce, Digestivo, The Great Red Dragon, Primavera, Aperitivo, Antipasto, Contorno. This episode comes in 8th, and The Woman Clothed with the Sun. And then in 9th is Secondo. Personal ranking. I felt like this episode, much like a lot of the middle episodes, is a lot of people coming together to talk about the things that they are doing. So we had we had Will talking to Alana about his visit with Hannibal. We had Alana talking to Hannibal about Will. We had Jack talking to Hannibal about Will. We have Freddie talking to Will about Hannibal. Basically, a lot of people talking to each other about Hannibal or Will, to either Hannibal or Will, as we then get a little bit more into the investigation, but there's really only a couple of scenes, like Will imagining himself at the crime scene when he's talking to Hannibal, and then Will and Hannibal, or rather Will visiting the crime scene on Hannibal's advice, and then the thing about the pets, but ultimately not much more than that. We get a little bit more insight into Dollarhide as a character and his motivation, but I just personally don't find him overly compelling, and as a result of that, I'm I don't really care. I thought we were done with Abigail. Now she's back again, so it's like I still don't understand why she was important. Way back in season 1, I thought like she should have been one and done, and now like she's back yet again, and I'm like, I don't get it. I just don't get her as a character being so important, because I feel like anything that they accomplished could probably have also been done without her. So there is that fact. In fact, she's the main thing that put a wedge between Hannibal and Will, so if she hadn't existed or been so important, Will might actually have ended up on Hannibal's side. So there is that as well, because it was him believing Hannibal had killed Abigail that kind of put him off Hannibal in those early seasons and whatnot. But ultimately, like, I felt like not a lot happened, not a lot of progress on the investigation. The characters that we got, more insight into, I felt like were characters either that are already dead and shouldn't matter anymore, and I don't even know why they mattered in the first place, Abigail, or we got some insight into Francis Dollarhide, but I really don't care if he has a romance with a blind person, because honestly, he's not super compelling, and I do kind of prefer how they did it in season 1, where there were other serial killers that they hunted, but they were kind of one episoders. But I know this is the part, I believe, that is based on the books more so. And so they're following that guideline, which probably was more centered around one killer, which is why they are focusing on Francis. But again, I don't find him super compelling. So overall, while I didn't think it was a terrible episode, I also wasn't overly excited about it, and I didn't feel like enough progress was made to really change my mind on that, and so I gave it a 3 out of 10 for this episode. And that brings the personal ranking to: in first, Digestivo, Dulce, Contorno, The Great Red Dragon, Aperitivo, Primavera, Secondo. This episode came in 8th for me as well, and The Woman Clothed with the Sun, and then in 9th place we had Antipasto. Which now brings us to the series ranking so far, and in first place we have Season 2 on our mostly objective with 86.92, Season 1 with 83.85, and so far Season 3 has 75 out of a possible 130. Then on the personal ranking side, Season 2 is in first with 88.46%, Season 1 at 66.92%, and Season 3 so far has 55 out of a possible 130. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Hannibal Season 3, Episode 9, and The Woman Clothed with the Sun. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.